Welcome, Rick. How are you today?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you so much for having me on this session today.
That's my pleasure. What we will see with you today, before we jump into the detail, is your digital value management system, because you are one of the founders of the DVMS Institute. Can you tell me more about yourself, about your experience, and why the DVMS Institute?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been in the information technology business for over 40 years. Basically, saw many transitions in technology and capabilities that organizations are taking advantage of today. I spent over 20 years in the IT service management business, helping organizations adopt and adapt, frameworks like ITIL in terms of their service delivery infrastructure. About 10 years ago, I was introduced to a new framework that was emerging from the folks who own the ITIL framework called Resilia. And it was my first introduction into the world of cybersecurity or cybersecurity risk management. So we were asked to build some curriculum around that, and as part of that process, we discovered a whole bunch of things about the world of IT in terms of cybersecurity that we didn't really understand before or know about before. And as part of that, we started to think about ways where we could create solutions that would help organizations not only create services and the value associated with those services and how to deliver those services, but really how to protect those services. The world was changing very rapidly. Organizations were getting breached, and confidential information was being stolen. Organizations were being held hostage. So we saw this emerging trend that the protection piece was going to become much more significant. So at that point in time, we started to dive deeper into the world of risk management in the context of IT services. And in turn, that's where the DVMS Institute was born.
Okay, good. I like the idea of protecting the services and value rated. If we talk about value, because this podcast is mainly about we call it value stream, so it's about value management. What would be, Rick, your definition of value?
Well, value to me is all about the customer experience. Okay, so the customer, first of all, they trust what you're providing them. That's a key element in today's world. It's all about trust because we don't know who to trust anymore or what to trust based on all the stuff that's been happening on a day-to-day basis. Okay, but in terms of value, the customer is expecting that if they purchase your service or leverage your service to do some sort of business capability that they need to deliver or take advantage of, that it does what it says it does. In other words, does it deliver the outcome that they're expecting? Okay. And now, if you look at the way the world is now, they're also expecting you to protect that value so that it doesn't go away or doesn't become impacted by some third party who's trying to, take down your service or cause some disruption to that service. All right. So they're looking for you as an organization or as a supplier of that service to make sure that you have a protection capability built into your service offering. And that all ties back to value. So to kind of summarize, it's all about that customer experience and the value of that customer experience that you need to not only design initially, but to protect ongoing so that that doesn't become impacted and that value doesn't degrade.
Okay, great. I think it's a really good definition of value. Do you really think that we can also extend this definition to other service stakeholders? What I mean is, uh, obviously, we say that the customer is the judge of the value. Okay, he perceives the value, he defines what he expects in terms of outcome. But what about the other, let's say, regulation authorities, other stakeholders that have some requirements on services? Do you see also, how do you see the value from their perspective?
Well, I think what we're starting to see, is a paradigm shift in those who are involved in the value creation discussion. Okay, So I think if you start with the regulators, okay, the
Yes.
regulators are worried about a lot of things that involve, national security or international security, the disruption to the world as we know it. So, that's the things that they're responsible for. So their view on value is we need to make sure we keep the lights on, we keep the fuel available to drive our automobiles and airplanes and whatever else. We need to keep our economy going. So they're putting in place regulations that are basically forcing organizations, whether it be government institutions or private entities, to ensure that they have factored risk into everything that they do, especially in the digital world, and that they've made all the right investments and are being completely transparent with their customers about those investments, so that their customers, or in the case of constituents for the government, that they feel comfortable that these services are delivering the capabilities and that those outcomes are secure. All right.
Mhm.
Now you take that one step further. So now the rules have been set. So the government sets the rules. All right. And now the institutions have to determine whether they agree with the rules or whether they are going to enforce the rules. And so I think we're in a kind of an interesting dilemma right now where a lot of organizations, never really viewed cybersecurity or risk management or service value as something that was, at the top of their pyramid in terms of their organizational thinking. And I think, and so there was nobody forcing them to change anything. So they weren't doing anything. And as the problem got continually worse, that's when the government had to step in and kind of change the rules. And now they're in the process of enforcing the rules. I'm not sure if you're aware of the SolarWinds incident that happened about a year ago. Now the government has brought them up on charges. In fact, they're holding the chief information security officer personally responsible for what happened. So it's going
Mhm.
to set a precedent in the market as to what happens to organizations who don't follow the rules. But it isn't so much about, the government itself. While that's important, you certainly don't want to get fined. You certainly don't want to end up in jail. But I think it's all about the customer experience. And so leadership needs to change its thinking in terms of, the value that they deliver to their customers and the capabilities they need to have within their organization, to sustain and enable those value points. And I think if as we look forward, it will become a competitive advantage for organization, right? It's all about what I mentioned earlier, building that trusted relationship, with the client, and letting the client, or engaging the client in the conversation. And you do that by being transparent, and you do that by fully connecting with your client base to ensure that you are meeting their goals. And maybe those goals will change over time as their needs change, and they need to become a voice in the development of your value strategy.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That's very good. Um, Now, when we talk about value management, you know that, for instance, in ITIL 4 and in IT for IT, they use the concept of value chain and value streams. Okay.
Hmm.
So from a demand, you create some values through these streams of activities, these flows of information and of work that leads to value. It looks like a bit of magic. I'm a bit personally obsessed about the value stream because I think it's a new light on what already exists in our industry in service management. And how do you address in your model or in DVMS or Institute this value stream, this value chain, this flow of value that is flowing into different parts of your organization to meet the objective or to fulfill any demand from a customer? How do you do that? How do you address or do you address the value stream in your model?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what we do. It's kind of funny. We use the term cybersecurity and cybersecurity risk, in many of the conversations because those are the topics people are interested in learning more about. But at the end of the day, it's all about value. Okay. It's about an organization's ability to protect its value. And so, when we talk about cybersecurity and cybersecurity risk, we always bring the conversation back to the ultimate outcome that you are delivering is customer value or service value. And so you need to focus in on that, and you need to understand all of the risk associated with the creation, the protection, and the delivery of that value. I think the world we've lived in up till now is all about and create and deliver. So we've developed best practices to create and deliver quicker with things like DevOps and Agile and so on and so forth. Okay, and then we've on the delivery side, we've implemented capabilities like cloud that give us the ability to adapt our business model to a global economy, a global environment very, very quickly. It gives us the ability to add compute, storage, and network on demand. All right. So they've really mastered the ability to create and deliver. The thing that's been missing is protection. Okay. And protection is probably the most important piece of that three-piece puzzle, right? Because protection involves not only understanding, the service from an end-to-end point of view, but it involves every aspect of the service. And let me start with the development of an application or a piece of software. Okay, when they create software or create an application, they have to be thinking about it from a risk point of view. In other words, is this software or this capability or this application is going to enable this new service or be fundamental to the new service? Have we done everything possible to protect that piece of software from being compromised where it would impact the service? So software developers and application developers need to be part of the equation. Okay. If you follow that all the way through, you go into your project and program managers, you go in through your networking people, you go through your cloud providers, your supply chain. Once again, everyone in that value chain needs to understand, that the piece that they're responsible for is protected as best they possibly can. But the key to protection, and this is kind of the secret word, is dependencies. All right. I think one of the challenges organizations face today is dependencies. They don't understand dependencies, especially in the world we live in with a global supply chain. We may have many suppliers we're working with to deliver a specific service. It just all kind of works. All right. People start connecting stuff and everything works. And that's great from a creation and delivery point of view. But if you haven't looked at that entire service delivery or service value chain from a protection point of view, more than likely you'll be compromised, or the service will be compromised, and the value to the customer will be compromised as well. So it comes down to understanding dependency. So I know who's dependent upon me as a supplier to get their job done, and they understand who they're dependent upon, who they're dependent upon to get their job done. So it really comes down to really dissecting the service value chain. Make sure that everyone in that value chain understands that it isn't just about create and deliver anymore. It's about adding protection in the middle. And that will allow the service to be delivered, at the value point that the customer is expecting. But more importantly, it would allow that service to maintain that level of value over time, even if it becomes disrupted. Because part of understanding risk is knowing what other pieces need to be put into that value chain to restore a service that might be impacted somewhere along the way. You can't account for every possible risk, but you can at least recover from the risk that you didn't know or that you couldn't mitigate in a quick and efficient way so that the customer's value is restored.
Oh, yeah. A couple of things just to sum up what you say. First, importance of the service relationship. That's what you say when we talk about, the dependencies. That's what they call in other model the service relationships. All these relationships that we have in SIAM, in other models. So that's very important. Another thing which is quite interesting is your concept of protection, which is something new. In fact, it's not really emphasized, in any model. So that's good. We will discuss in a minute. I hope you see my screen where I have your nice CPD model.
Mm-hmm.
So we will discuss that in a minute. But before we jump into that, one thing that also interests me is your view on we know where a value stream starts, but we still struggle where a value stream stops, honestly. And that's the problem, because in fact we all know that a value stream by nature is a reactive approach. Meaning what? Meaning that we react on a demand from a stakeholder, from a customer, okay, and then we try to standardize the way a little bit like a process, okay, where we have some input and we create output. That's the kind of story. But the idea of a value stream is that we say that we end up with a value, but at the end of the day, we end up with condition to create value, which is a service or a product. So the question is, where do we stop? Where does the value stream end? Does it end by developing new version of a service, or by making, which is in fact your scope of control as a service provider, or increasing that to your scope of influence to be sure that you can really help the customer getting the results, the outcomes, and the user using the maximum of the capability from your service. What is your view on that? Where do we end with a value stream? Where is the end of a value stream?
Well, hopefully I've understood the question correctly, but I'll give you my thoughts, and I'm sure you'll jump in and put me back on the right track. You know, we view the value stream as never ending. In fact, the value stream needs to be continually innovated, right? And if you look at the diagram on the screen, this diagram, what we call the CPD model, create, protect, and deliver, is really built around what we call the 7 minimum viable capabilities a business needs to have in place in order to deliver value and continually innovate value. Okay, so those 7 steps are: you need to have governance. Okay, you need to have rules that you set up, to ensure that the service being delivered aligns with the goals of the business, and more importantly, the goals of the customer. Okay, you need to have assurance. You need to measure everything that you're delivering and continually understand whether or not you're meeting your goals or exceeding those goals, or going below the goals, and what you need to do to get back on track. Okay, you need to have the ability to plan. You need to have the ability to design. You need to have the ability to execute and change. In fact, change is the new world order. And organizations need to understand that change is a constant thing. And as you know from your experience, people do not like change because change is hard. But if you develop a system that supports change, change becomes easy. All right. So that's a really key piece of the minimum viable capabilities. And then you need to have the ability to innovate. So by knowing what the rules are, what the goals are, by measuring against those goals, and having a process that if you need to update your service value chain or your service value capabilities based on, it could be disruptions, from a cybersecurity point of view, it could be disruptions from a business point of view, anything that requires you to change, you have a process to deal with that change, a process that allows you to quickly adapt the updates that you need to continue to deliver the value of the service that you're providing. Okay. So I don't ever see it ending. In fact, with all of the new risk that the digital landscape presents us, I mean, you look at it, it's just absolutely crazy. Every day we connect more and more devices. There are more and more ways to penetrate systems and gain access to secure data. And it will even get worse when quantum computing hits the streets here in the not too distant future. So as an organization who's in the digital services business and delivering digital service capabilities and value, there's no end game. It's a forever thing. You have to have this as a business process that supports the delivery of those services and the value that they enable.
Mm-hmm. That's quite clear. I like that. So I think that you answered my question related to the relationship between the value stream and your model, and I know that your model seems to be quite complete. It is complete. You cannot say anything else. It is complete. On the other hand, when I was talking about the value and where we have to put the stop, it was much more like where we can, because as we know, in a value stream, the key, one of the key word is to collaborate. So that means that there is no real business and service provider. We are much more like partners in the value stream. So it's much more
Absolutely.
about
Mm.
this also. This is also a new paradigm, because many people mentally say, okay, I'm the customer, I pay for the service, you are the provider, you deliver the service I want. So there is a strict separation of, you are the provider, I am the consumer or the customer, and that's the way we work. In a value stream, we talk really about a real partnership. And in a partnership, for instance, who can be, who can take the lead on our users don't use only 10% of the services we have. So we just get, in fact, 10% of the outcome we wanted from this our value stream. So the value that we get is quite miserable, if we compare it with the value proposition at the beginning of when we, created this value stream. And I don't say who wants to blame, but if we talk about partnership, how we could address that when you talk about the
Yeah,
service usage,
absolutely. Yeah, I use this three-term uh, approach to the question you just presented, and I call it my three C's. Okay, so the first C is about convergence, and what I mean by that is there are many things that need to converge to guarantee the delivery of outcomes. Okay, so let me start with just frameworks and standards and models and all those things that organizations have already invested in and are already leveraging within their organizations, typically within what I call silos. Okay, so they be business silos or IT silos or whatever. All right. All of those things exist for a reason. They are best practices or good practices that allow organizations to at least ensure that they can deliver a successful outcome. Okay. When I talk about convergence, if you look at the world of digital and how the value chain is built, all of these capabilities that exist within silos or within business units need to converge. All right, they need to be able to work together as a system to ensure that the outcomes are being delivered and that the process management capability is there, the development management capabilities are there, all of the things that these individual things deliver. They need to come together as an overlay system, or as a system of systems, to ensure that we've got all the bases covered, from the convergence of frameworks and models and standards. Okay. There also needs to be a convergence in terms of the people involved in bringing that all together. All right. So those people involved, I think I said it earlier, software developers, project managers, business professionals, all within the organization, and the customer. All right. So there has to be a convergence of how all those entities, connect together. And that leads to my second C. And my second C is communications. All right. There has to be a way for all of those components of the service value chain to communicate with each other, which ties back to what I said earlier about dependencies. So if we're communicating, and I understand, what you're dependent upon and what I'm dependent upon, we're constantly communicating to make sure that those dependencies are being met in terms of the outcome that we're delivering. Okay. And you would think with all of the wonderful technology we have in place today to communicate that we'd be communicating correctly, but we're not. Okay. So that needs to change. Right now, there's a bit of a challenge in making this all work because of the way organizations are structured, mostly around silos. I'm responsible for network applications, desktop storage, cloud, whatever. You really need to have a mechanism that can be part of this overlay to allow that communication to exist. And part of that's covered in the CPD model. We call it the 3D knowledge model. So it allows you to build that extension to the service value chain that allows communication to happen. And that's all the way from the customer through the supplier through its supply chain and all the other pieces that bring that service value chain together. The third C is about collaboration. So now that you have convergence in place, you've got communication vehicles in place, now you can collaborate so that everyone in that service value chain can say, hey, wait a minute, I think there's a better way to do this. All right. I think we can increase the value that we deliver to the customer, or the customer can say, you're not delivering enough value because I needed to do this. I don't know about you, but what drives me absolutely crazy is when my phone provider decides to do an upgrade to the operating system. And I've grown totally comfortable with the value that that phone has been providing me for the last 3 years. Okay. And now they change everything. They change the sounds that I had enabled to know when I get a phone call or a text message. They change this, they change that. So they're not thinking about me. They're thinking about what I could possibly be thinking about. Okay. So they really don't do a good job of surveying the customer base to understand, are you comfortable with this value today, or do you think it can be better? And how do you think that could be better? Okay. So it's all about creating, the communications and the collaboration capabilities within an organization, to allow that to continue. And once again, that enhances the value of the relationship. It enhances the value of the service.
Good. In that case, I would add a 4C, which will be co-creation. Based on all what you say, you co-create value. That's the 4C. And I like your idea, because that's exactly what we do. When you say about your example about, upgrading the operating system, that's exactly what they say. If you are good in co-creation, you listen to the customer, and then you prioritize what is good, not for you, but for them.
Absolutely.
So that's a good example of value co-creation, and I think that your model also addresses a lot of questions that many organizations can have. I have a last question to you. Your model, at the first glance, seems quite complicated. I have to be honest with you. When you look at that, we think that it is complete, it's holistic, but as many holistic and model like that, it seems at the first glance to be complicated. If I have a small organization with an IT department of 5 people, okay, can I use your model?
Once again, my favorite word is absolutely. Yes, you can. You can, because what the CPD model is it's an overlay model. Okay. So basically what that means is that this sits on top of all of your existing business systems, but it enables these new capabilities. Okay. And so the beauty of an overlay model is that it fits any size organization, regardless of size, scale, and complexity.
Yeah.
So I can be a 5-person company selling widgets to the government, or I can be a multi-thousand-person company building aircrafts and weapon systems and whatever else. It doesn't really matter. Now, the reason that it doesn't really matter, and this diagram is kind of interesting, and I'll just share with you a quick tidbit on that. When we first created this diagram and we put it into our books that we wrote, and our reviewers were going through the books and to validate that we were on track and everything was good, one of the reviewers sent me a note back. She says, Rick, this diagram's really interesting. She says, I think this is a golden nugget. I think this is something that will resonate with the audience, right? I said, oh, okay. Let me test that out. So I took the diagram and I posted it on LinkedIn with very little description of what it was. Within 24 hours, I had 25,000 people review the diagram. I had a whole bunch of them comment on the diagram, and I had a whole bunch of LinkedIn connections right after that, which I found rather interesting, right? So I actually pursued that one step further. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, David, is that this diagram, for folks who live in this world that we've been talking about, the service value creation world, this diagram allowed all the dots to connect in their head. They could see how this, strategy and governance loop and the operational and execute loop and the feedback loops, they've had that in their head, but they've never been able to put it all together. So I confirmed what the reviewer had said, that this was a golden nugget. Okay. But I also realized, as you stated, that the diagram can be quite intimidating. Okay. If you look at it. All right. And so what we did was we built a series of explainer videos short explainer videos that break this down into its components. So we first talk about, what is an overlay model and what is its value to an organization, okay? And then we talk about the CPD model. So we break this really cool diagram apart and we talk about how each of these pieces, which this is basically a complex system, okay, and how these different pieces work individually and how they work together. And when you're looking at a complex system, when you have a problem, you can't just look at it in the context of one of the pieces. You have to look at it in context of the system, and any change that's made to that system could impact the output of other pieces of the system. Okay. Just to add a little bit more information about this, we did a lot of research and work that came out of MIT here in the U.S. on complex systems. There was a document from Meadows that has a lot of detail about the 13 main components of a complex system and so on and so forth. And so, people who really want to dive into the detail behind it, there's a whole set of research, behind this that provide a much deeper explanation. But what we've done in our publications, in our training programs, is we've abstracted that to the point so the average man can have that connect the dots moment and then start to see how they can move forward. But with that being said, the first thing we tell organizations that they need to do is to know where they are right now, because you can only start where you're at. You can't start anywhere else but where you're at. Okay. And so in order to understand where you're at, right, you need to do an assessment, and that assessment needs to be done through a risk lens, not a compliance lens, which was what most institutions are used to. Are you compliant with this? Yes. Are you compliant with that? No. And, it goes back and forth. In a risk world, you're actually asking questions about, the capability. How does this capability exist in your organization? And how does it deliver the outcome that you say it does? All right. And so you may have to ask, to get to an answer to one question, you may have to ask 20 different questions to get that person or that organization thinking along the right lines to give you that information. Once you have all that information together, okay, now you know where you are and you compare it against where the DVMS tells you need to be, and then you can develop a plan to mitigate the risk associated with getting there, okay? And so, and once they have that in place, then we have there's a fast track component to DVMS that allows you to put in place what we call the baseline operating system. So if you're committed to protecting the service value, right, the first thing you need to do is have an incident response center in place, right? So if somebody has a problem, they have a way to communicate it to you so you can go correct it, okay? Then you need to have in place at least a minimum viable set of controls to ensure that the operation or the value chain is stabilized, okay? It can operate, it can survive a hit and whatever else that happens to it, okay? And then you can innovate that service value chain, by adding in additional controls and capabilities, not only features within the service itself, but the structure or the infrastructure that delivers that service to make it better, okay, make it faster, make it more reliable, things like that. So what starts out as a real complex diagram turns out to be something very, very simple when you take this approach to dealing with it and utilizing it within your organization.
Mm-hmm. I think that this is definitely something that is very interesting. Nowadays, there are a lot of new frameworks coming in the space of service management, value management, and I really think that this one really deserves. That's also why I wanted to have you today on this podcast, because I really think that this one deserves a very, very deeper look. So, how can people reach you, Rick? What is the best way to reach out to you?
Well, as you know from how we met on social media, I hate to use this term, but it's the only one I can think of. I'm a socialholic. I love people. I love to communicate and share ideas and have conversations, that lead to, the betterment of mankind and the betterment of the value chain,
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I'll answer your question in 1 second, but I think I want to talk about the Institute for a second, because the Institute, it was set up to create a collaborative environment that everyone could participate in. So the founders of the Institute, myself and my two partners, Dave Nichols and Dave Moskowitz, we built the beginning of the program. All right. So we built the first two publications. We built some training products. We're in the process of actually writing 8 additional books and 8 new products that will be coming out early next year. But what we want is the community to build, and we want community members to contribute to the scheme. Okay, so it's completely open in terms of contributions, in terms of extending the capability that the Institute enables. So to answer your question, the best way to get in touch with me is either through social media. Connect with me on social media. Obviously, you go to my website. My information is there as well, and be more than happy to spend some time with you. There's a lot of valuable tools there that will kind of get you ready for any conversation that you want to have about the CPD model or any of the things that we talked about today.
It was really my pleasure for having you today on this podcast. I really thank you, Rick. And
thank you, David.
And I wish you the best of luck for your CPD model, for all the new stuff that we look forward to getting from your DVMS Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, David.